Greetings and welcome to Anita Talks History and Genealogy. I'm so pleased that you all could join me. We're in February. Actually, it's February the 15th, 2026, as African American History Month. And I want to tell part of my family history that has to do with them, these people taking land from us, from the formerly enslaved. And it's really kind of maddening because the community in which I'm referring to doesn't want me or anyone talking about the deeds that they've done to our families, over the years, because they're, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's because they're in the North. They're not in the South. But there were people that were in the North losing their land too. And I'm going to tell you the story about great-great-grandpa Samuel Ruth and his land that was taken. But before I start, okay, this is my opinion. I'm sharing this from, what was told to me, not only what was told to me by my mother, but what I was able to document, because I did research that story and I found it to be true. And I wrote a book about it, in which I wrote 7 books, but this book, Pieces of the Quilt, the Mosaic of an African American Family, I spoke of them taking, the county taking great-grandpa Ruth's land. Before I start, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you can, please get a paid subscription. You can also donate. You can donate to me at Venmo, Anita, ANITA -Wills-4. And that will, everything that you do, when you tune in, you're helping. You help the algorithm. When you get a paid subscription, you're helping me. And if you donate or if you buy the merchandise that I have, it's all helping to keep this channel floating and to keep me here sharing these stories that are not going to be taught in history, but that can be researched, and they are true. With that, let me start. My great-great-grandpa on my mother's side, okay, this is my mother's maternal side, grandmother Leah Ruth Martin. Okay, she was named after her grandmother, who was a slave woman named Leah. And grandmother Leah, her parents were Samuel, Ruth, and Maria Louisa Ruth. And Samuel is the one who was great-great-grandpa Samuel Ruth. He was born in Beaufort County, South Carolina. His father was the white man who owned his slaves, who owned great-grandmother Leah, who had purchased her. Great-grandmother Leah was enslaved when she was 12 years old from Guinea, West Africa. And this was in 1830, long after it was actually illegal to bring slaves from Africa in 1830. So what they did, they captured her and children from her village in Guinea and took them to be seasoned in Bermuda. Then they sold them as slaves. I believe some of them went to Hilton Head, South Carolina, but Leah was bought by Robert Ruth. And Robert Ruth wasn't growing nothing on his farms, on that farm. And I'm saying that because I looked at the census. There was only slave women on his farm, maybe 4 or 5. And Leah had 4 children by him. And she said that they sold all of her black children. So this man, you know, as unpleasant as it is, must have had a farm where he was breeding, he was breeding them. And he sold all her black children. But great-grandpa Ruth was his, and there was 2 other children. I think there was 3 or 4 that were that belonged to him. And he told great-grandpa Ruth his birthday. His birthday was in July of 1850. I think it was July the 6th or 16th or something like that. But he knew his birthday, and even after slavery, he kept his last name, Ruth. But this Robert Ruth, he sold the mulatto children. He was selling the children she had with, that he was breeding her with, the black children. He was selling them. And then he sold the mulatto children as indentured servants, as slaves to Savannah, Georgia. So great-grandpa Ruth, when he was about 7 years old, in like 1857, him and his siblings were sold to Savannah, Georgia as slaves, as house slaves. He was being taught, to be a blacksmith. So, in other words, they weren't in the field. They were around at a house and close to the house. That is not necessarily a blessing, especially if you're a girl and you're in that household. And, he was, from what I hear, Samuel was subjected to brutal beatings. If he cried for his mother, he was subjected to beatings. It was not a pleasant experience. None of slavery was a pleasant experience. But what happened with Samuel was that he was there. He was like 13 years old when the Civil War started. And at that time, he was told to get out of the house, to run, because the soldiers were coming. And whoever had the children, didn't want to be caught with slaves in the house. So he was running. He was running for his life. He was terrified. They didn't tell, they weren't giving him any directions. They just told him to get out of the house, run. And he was running down the street, and here comes this black soldier on a horse with a weapon. He had never seen any black people like that. And they had a uniform on. And the black soldier stopped, and he was terrified that, they were going to kill him. And he started talking to him, and he said, you're okay. We're gonna make sure that you're okay, and we're gonna take you back to, to where they were, where their camp was, So they took him back and kept him. He was 13, and he was a water boy. He became a water boy, and he was, helping the soldiers. And they took him. This was the 54th Massachusetts. So when you're seeing Glory, which was about the 54th Massachusetts, it didn't end with them killing Colonel Shaw. They killed Colonel Shaw, but the 54th Massachusetts joined Sherman on his march to through Savannah. So that's where they were when they picked up great grandpa, great uh, grandpa Ruth. They were in Savannah, and they got got the children, and they got other slaves, and they took them to their camp where they were camped out at, and eventually they took I think after the end of the war or something, they took them to Burlington, New Jersey. So they took Samuel to Burlington, New Jersey, and he met would become great great grandpa Robert Penn. He lived in his household. Great great grandpa Robert Penn was born free in Virginia, and had moved his family um, to Burlington, first to Columbia, Pennsylvania, and then to Burlington, New Jersey. He was a pastor. He was a Baptist minister in Philadelphia. So, and he had a Sabbath school. So when the slaves were coming, they were taking them to Burlington, New Jersey, and leaving them with Robert Penn, Reverend Penn, and they were to attend Sabbath school. And then they were learning a trade. But they needed, the first thing he told them was, you need to read and write. And so I captured great grandpa Samuel's signature. And the first time he wrote his signature, he put a $sign on S for Samuel. And I was like, you got that right, because he told him that an educated man could never be enslaved. So they had to learn how to read and write, and they had to learn a skill how to take care of themselves. So great grandpa Ruth, his skill was farming and blacksmithing, because that is what he was learning when he was sent to Savannah. They taught him, blacksmithing, and Samuel fell in love with Maria Louisa Penn, and she was the daughter of Reverend Robert Penn. But when they were in that household, there wasn't nothing, untoward going on, because he told them, you can't marry till you're 21, and there was nothing going to be, taking place there untoward. But they both left. I think they were 20 or so when they left, and they went, so they're in Burlington, they went to Chester County, and he worked on a farm as a blacksmith, and she was a domestic working on another farm. But they were still engaged, waiting till they were 21 to get married. And when they were 21, they got married. And it still took them a while to, get their first place together. And so they got their place. But Samuel started buying land. He had built a house. He bought some land. They built a house. Maria also bought land. She bought land where there is the church, which is our family church, the Church of God, which is still there in Urshelton, Pennsylvania. So this Urshelton is where they went, which is in Chester County, Pennsylvania. And they had about 10 children, at least 10 that lived, including, my grandmother, Leah, and they were prominent members of the community. And great grandpa was a farmer. His main crop, like most of the crops in that area, was corn. And things were working out. I mean, I didn't see any issues, because I always, as a genealogist, collect papers on who my ancestors were, and I look at the census records. I see how they were identified. Like he was identified as mulatto, and she was identified as mulatto. So they were, and then they would come back, like the next year they may be identified as Negro or Black. It's according to how Chester County felt. How did you look, or what time of the year were they classifying you. So Samuel, um, up until the time he passed, he was identified as mulatto. So, but that's not the issue. The issue had to do with land. At him being a prominent farmer, and they had like a farmer's. Um, it's like they list the farmers and who are the prominent farmers, and he had been on that list a couple of times. And after Maria, great grandmother Maria passed, they started going after him, telling him that he owed taxes on the land that she had bought where the church was. And he got an attorney and told him, no, we don't owe taxes on that land. It was the church was built on the land, and then there was a cemetery. There was no taxes owed on that land, but this particular sheriff was after him because he wasn't supposed to know that, this Negro man. You were not supposed to talk back to the sheriff, or, if they say you owe them something, you give it to them. And like my mother said, those white folks around there were really nasty. Some of them were nice. We're not talking about the nice ones. We're talking about the nasty ones, the ones that were collectors, the tax collectors, who always thought that if you were a black or brown person, a Negro or a mulatto or colored or whatever, you owed something. And if you didn't, they were going to make it up. So when he was, I think it was the year that he died, like he was 87 years old, my mother said the sheriff showed up. This was what her mother told her, because my mother was born in 1923. So I think it was what great grandmother Leah, my grandmother Leah told her, that the sheriff from Chester County went into the house. They had a beautiful farmhouse that he had either purchased. It was part of the Underground Railroad, but it was a house that they raised the children in. They had 10 children, plus they had, sometimes the grandchildren were there, sometimes other people were living there. And also great grandpa Ruth was the pastor. He was the pastor of the Church of God in Urshelton. And he was a prominent man. And then he was growing corn, which was the staple crop in Pennsylvania. Most of the farmers were growing corn in Pennsylvania, as had the natives who they replaced. The indigenous people were raising corn too, until they made a law against them raising it. But great grandpa Ruth was about 87 years old, and they said that the sheriff went into his house, beat him up, and told him to take everything he could put in his wagon and get out. They were saying he did not own that land, or that he owed taxes. This is in Chester County, Pennsylvania, one of the richest counties in the United States. They put him off the land. He had mom said he had he had like a wagon or a truck, and then on the back of it there was something where a pallet or something where you could put stuff, and he had to get out that night, and the sheriff had beat him. And some of his children were in the area, but nobody did anything. That's the fear that they had, because what could you do? And he went and he lived with one of the children, and nobody said anything. And the sheriff and his family, I believe, occupied that land. And this is what I'm saying. What, when we're talking about the land that was taken so that it could not be generational land given to the children and kept in the family, so that we could not have generational wealth. Not only do they not want us to have generational wealth, they did not want us talking about it. My family doesn't want me talking about it. They were saying, oh, well, they said he owed taxes. But I went to the the archives and stuff, and I asked them, I wrote a letter and I asked them about the deed. And they said, oh, he did have a deed, but he had not recorded it. So they knew that he owned that land, that was his land. He had a deed to it. And I found other deeds to the land where he was growing the corn. And somehow or other, the house is back in the family, somewhat. It's heirs' property, but it's a historical landmark because it's part of the Underground Railroad. But the land where he was growing the corn that they said he did not own, he never took that back. He never got back on that land. And none of the family ever got back on that land. They did not want to go up against Chester County. And so this was he was about 87 or so when he died. And then I think this was the year that he died. So, and he was someone who worked hard. He was not dependent on the system. He raised all of his children, and he gave land to some of the children. They are still living in and around Urshelton. There are some family members who still live there. But the beating, the way that sheriff of Chester County went in there and abused him. And I'm going to write more about that because I'm going to write the year that it was done. I know that he was 87 and he was born in 1850. So that would, that was in it was in after 1925 because great-grandmother Maria Louisa, she died about 1825, and he died a couple of years later. So this was after her death, but I'm going to put some more in here, and again, because I just want to be able to say what the truth is, because we had to go through the humiliation of renting, of begging these people, and a lot of them were racist. They were coming as immigrants into that area, and they were building communities, entire communities. Like one of them was called Levittown. They built for all whites. They were building entire communities for whites who were coming from Europe. In the meantime, they were taking our land. They were taking our ancestors' lands. And that's only one story. That's only one story. But long live the memory of my great-grandfather, Samuel Ruth. And I just want folks to know that this is why they don't want us to tell our history. This is not the history that's going to be in the history books. And my books have been banned in Chester County, but they can't ban me from talking on social media. So I'm telling you, my book, Pieces of the Quilt, The Mosaic of an African American Family, tells this story. And also, another book that I wrote about Chester County was Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color. So, in the beginning, in the beginning chapters, I spoke about that, of my books. And we have to tell our own truth and not be afraid and not be gatekeepers for the atrocities that they have committed against us and our people, you know? And so this is African American History Month, and I want to share that I'm so proud of great-grandpa Samuel. Not only did he own a farm, a very prosperous farm, took care of himself and his wife and them children, but he went to South Carolina about 1889, long after the Civil War. He went to Hilton Head, where his mother had been sold by his father, and he got his mother. He got great-grandmother Leah and took her back to their farm. He built her a house on his land and treated her like a queen. Even though he was a Christian minister, great-grandmother Leah was a Muslim. And they respected her faith. They did not try to make her into a Christian. She, she told them how she wanted to be buried, and they respected how she wanted to be buried. When she died, she passed about 1915. She was like 97 years old. And these are beautiful people. These are historical people. These are my ancestors. And I stand on their shoulders, and I admire and respect them. Were they perfect? No. No human being is perfect. But they were. They did not use slavery as a reason not to love, not to care, not to cherish. And long may their memories live. And I'm so proud of them. And I want to say it to everyone, even though this is the shortest month in a year, but this is not our only, celebration of who we are. And so I want to say that have a wonderful African American History Month and beyond. And let's keep on holding our peace and doing what we do and telling our stories and sharing our ancestors' memories and keeping them alive. Nobody can take that from us. We're going to do that. We're going to continue to do that and stay in that tradition. I'm Afro-Indigenous. I have Native ancestry. I have Mohawk ancestry. I have Monacan ancestry. You name it. So we were there. Our ancestors were there when they colonized. Some of them were brought up from South America as slaves, but we are indigenous to the Americas, and we also have some African ancestors, and I proudly tell their stories. You all have a wonderful day, and God bless.